Interesting. You don't see Father's Day up there, do you? Thought to myself, every time I stand up and every time I get to deliver a lesson on a day that the world celebrates, it seems like for some reason that because that's what people are thinking about, that ends up being what I talk about. But you'll notice it's not there. But as I went through this lesson and working through it, I came to a conclusion that made me smile. And so I'm hoping that you're going to get 2 lessons in one this morning. And maybe that's why there's so many slides. If you were wondering why it seems so thick, it's because hopefully you're going to learn 2 different things from the main source. But I want to talk about the idea that mentorship is the future of the church. And when I say that, I mean that we need to be bringing up the young in a manner that they are going to continue to follow the proper path and sustain the Lord's church. And so anytime I look at an idea of something, I want to know, how is it defined? And mentor is defined as an experienced and trusted advisor. They use terms like a guru or a counselor. And the verb is advised to train, especially someone younger. When we're talking about mentoring, generally, we are talking about passing down the wisdom of age to the younger. And so that's what we're really looking at. Where did it come from? I found this was odd. I would not have guessed this, but I researched it. Its origin and meaning comes from actually Odysseus, the name of the wise and trusted companion friend of Ulysses. He was the guardian of Ulysses' house during his 10-year absence of the Trojan Wars, and so he became the trusted teacher and advisor of Ulysses' son, Telemachus. So this idea of having a mentor started with this idea in Greek mythology of someone allowing for, or basically turning their child over to an individual to raise and care for 10 years. Now, I don't know how many of you that have children right now are ready to hand them off to someone and trust them enough to go ahead and raise those children and do that properly for the next 10 years. And then I see some faces. You may have some that say, I can't wait to hand them off and give them some time. But I guarantee you, in about 10 days, not 10 years, you'll want them back, if not sooner. But there is this idea of being able to trust. And we do have an example, and I think Paul is probably the greatest example that I can find in Scripture as far as an individual who mentored multiple people. Yes, you could put Christ in there as well. But for our purposes, and I'm just going to strictly look at his relationship with just one individual. But there's another name that immediately comes to mind, for me at least, when I think about Paul and mentoring, and that name is Barnabas. And I believe that Paul mentored Barnabas. I believe Paul mentored a lot of people. But let's look at how he mentored young Timothy. And so the first thing that I'm going to say is a mentor takes the time to seek out a mentee. In other words, people are not going to come up to you and say, will you please be my mentor? At least not on a regular basis. You may find that with some, but a mentor is actually looking out and they're thinking about, so we as Christians should be looking and thinking about, hey, here's someone that I'm going to invest time in, that I am going to help to see and learn. In Acts chapter 16, verses 1 through 3, it says, he came to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a certain Jewish woman who believed, but his father was Greek. And then I highlighted, this young man was well spoken of by the brethren who were at Lystra and Iconium, and Paul wanted to have him go on with him. So he arrives at this place, he finds someone that's well spoken of, and he desires him to come. And so he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in that region, for they all knew that his father was Greek. And so he was actually looking for, as he traveled, people to work with. And then I think a mentor recognizes potential. They look at someone and they see what they have to offer. And so this idea of helping teach someone, the idea of taking away the M off of impossible and realizing that these people can make it possible, that they're able to do something. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, we find that Timothy was timid. Now, if you are someone that is traveling and you're going out and you're having to establish a church somewhere and you're going out and trying to teach people, and you would generally think, I'm not going to take the first person that's a little bit nervous about talking in front of people or is a little bit nervous, right? And we find that he was timid and fearful, but he tells, for God has not, 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So we can help them to overcome this particular fearful thing because God has given us that power. And this would have been big for him at this time. His spiritual heritage was divided because he had a Greek father and a Jewish mother. And so you might look at it and say, it's impossible to think anybody's going to be influenced by him because he's connected at both sides. And he can be a target for either side saying, oh, well, he's involved in this as well. And so Paul could have looked at that and said, you know what? It's going to be near impossible for him to have influence because of his background. But Paul tells him, well, let's go over. He was also young and inexperienced. And I know that over time, I've seen this, and I appreciate the intent behind it, but I've seen this verse used, which says, let no one despise your youth, but be an example for the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, and in faith and purity. And I have seen some members in the past who will take this idea of no one despise your youth, and they'll take it to a level of like a 12 or 13-year-old and things like that. And I understand the good behind it. But when we talk about Paul, we need to realize his youth, he was probably in his mid to late 30s. And at 50 now, I agree, that's a young man. I want to agree, that's still a young man. But the point that he's trying to give is that he saw someone who was young, who was inexperienced, who was timid, and who had a divided heritage. So on my little checklist, as I'm considering, I have a con, and I have a con. Where's something for the pro side, right? But Paul could look back at this. He could see past this. He could see that this person was well-spoken, and he could see there was potential there. But how do we reach our full potential? Isn't it someone helps us pull it out of us, right? Don't you hear that appeal? You need to help that person to learn to reach their full potential. It needs to be helped and it needs to be pulled. Because we're our own worst critic, right? We will see in ourselves failures that other people say are successes. We will think that we are not good at things that other people say we do well. Because we're our own worst critic. So again, we have to look past the cons, we have to find the positives, and we have to say, this is somebody that I can work with and that I can help. Paul recognized that other believers spoke well of him. And like I said earlier, that's kind of a nice thing to add there. He already had a reputation of being a pretty good person. Then I believe that a mentor takes the time to pray for their mentee. And I would ask you, do you sometimes just stop and pray, and specifically for someone that you're trying to teach? Specifically associated with this particular individual, you take the time to pray for them, that they continue to grow, that they continue to mature, and that they continue to be a strong worker for the Lord. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 3, he says, I thank God, whom I serve with a pure conscience, as my forefathers did, as without ceasing I remember you in my prayers night and day. Who's he talking to? Well, who's the letter written to, right? Letter's written to Timothy. He says, I remember you in my prayers night and day. And then a mentor not only prays for and hopes for, but you got to spend time with them, right? You can't say, "Oh, I'm gonna help influence this," but I'm not going to spend any time with them, right? Hey, have you ever seen these things for big brothers, big sisters, and they're looking for them to be what? To be a mentor, right? What's one of the things that they require of you? You have to have time that you're willing to give up to spend with them, and it shouldn't be time where you think, "Boy, this is not quality time." This is, we want to give time, effort, and energy. Acts 16, in speaking of their journeys, Paul wanted to have him go with him, and he took him and circumcised him because the Jews were in that region, and they knew his father was Greek. And then it says, and as they went through the cities, they delivered to them the decrees. And we can stop right there. Say, as they went into the cities means they were traveling together, right? When I stop and think about the one advantage that they had back then that you don't see today is when you travel, how do you travel? Generally on foot. And so it takes a lot longer. And generally, if you're spending a lot of time with someone, how comfortable is it to travel in silence? Right? Generally, you talk and you get to know one another. It's not like sitting in a minivan today where you have the driver driving, the passenger is texting someone in the third row of the same vehicle, and all this other. And by the way, the two people in the middle have their heads down and they're buried in something. And there's no quality time being given. So it is very different. But he spent time. They spent time together. And I don't want to say that the social is not more important than spiritual. It's absolutely not. But there was, I'm sure, social conversation and social things that were done together as they traveled. And so if you're going to mentor someone, that means spending time with them. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 4, he tells him he greatly desires to see you, right? That makes a person feel good, right? When it says, I want to see you. As opposed to, well, I'll check the calendar and see if I can fit you in somewhere, right? I'll see if I can make room for you. Or, you know what? I will make room for you. And I'll do it because I desire to do that. And because I know. And that people forget that this is a two-sided relationship, isn't it? It's not one way. And if you as a mentor are not growing and gaining as well as you're working with a mentee, then your mindset isn't right as you're doing it. You're missing something along the way. It's a two-way relationship that should be beneficial to both. And then you got to practice what you preach, right? If you're going to tell somebody or try to shape the life of how somebody lives, and then you choose to do just the opposite under certain circumstances, how likely are they to listen to you? Right? How likely are they to listen to you? I mentioned just this morning, and I don't know if I've said this, I know I've said it from behind pulpit somewhere, that one of the things that I'll do is if I really need to work on something, and we all do, all of us have that I will preach a sermon on how to handle that, and then, oh, by the way, now I'm on notice, because I have just expressed to everybody exactly what it is that needs to be done and how to do it. And then if I turn around and don't do it, I'm in the wrong. So as you train, and what do we want the church to look like when we leave, right? 25, 30 years from now, when many of us are no longer here, don't we want to feel like the activity and the things that are taking place are just the same as it was when we were walking through this doors? Or is it like a lot of things where you come back and 25 or 30 years later, a building has the same name on it, but you say, man, this is nothing like I remember it, right? This is nothing like, why? Because the ideas and the understanding of what should take place changed. So are we ingraining, are we practicing what we preach so that as we pass on, we know that in the future, as long as there are people here on this earth, it will look the same. Listen to how he tells him. He says in 2 Timothy 3:10 and 11, but you have carefully followed my doctrine, manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, perseverance, persecution, affliction, which happened to me at Iconium, at Lystra, what persecutions I endured, and out of all of them the Lord delivered me. Look at all the things that he saw, right? You have seen all of these things in the life that I've lived. And so you've seen how you ought to handle these difficult situations. And oh, by the way, the other thing that you've seen is that the Lord delivered me out of them. He didn't say, and I was able to get through it on my own, right? If you do it the way I do, if you do it the way I tell you, things are going to work out just fine because it's why I told you, right? Do some people give advice in that manner? No. It works out because it's the Lord working through them. And there's an understanding that one needs to have. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 through 8, he says, I'm already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who loved his appearing. And I look at it, and look at Paul's confidence. And we want to instill confidence in the people that we're teaching. We want them to see how we live. We want to believe in ourselves. Look at his confidence. He says, there is a crown of righteousness which the Lord will give me. There's no doubt about it. In his mind, he knows what's happened. And he says, I fought the good faith. I've finished the race. I have kept the faith. And I know these things are going to happen for me, right? Not come and say, and if you do these things and you work your best, God might bless you. If you try real hard, there's a chance. There's not a chance, folks. There's a guarantee. So let's call it what it is. If you do what God asks you to do, it's not a chance that you will enter heaven. It's a guarantee. And we need to teach and mentor and explain to the young that we do know where we're going to be when we die. And you need to ask yourself how you would answer that question. If someone came to you and said, do you believe you're going to heaven when you die? You say, well, I think so. My first question would be, well, why aren't you sure? The answer is absolutely. And I've heard people say, well, doesn't that make you arrogant? I said, nope. That's not arrogance at all. That's faith and belief in somebody else. That's faith and belief in what God said. It's not faith and belief in my own abilities. It's not arrogant. But you don't have to live your life unsure. And we want them to understand that. Because you're going to go through trials. You're going to go through afflictions. Timothy, you've seen me go through all of these things. And yet, the Lord has pulled me through, and I've never had to change my mind about things. I've had the confidence. I've gone through. So a mentor has to practice what they preach. And then you have to provide opportunities for growth, right? And what can also happen when you provide an opportunity to grow? What might happen? You might have a failure, right? Something might go wrong. But you can't sit back and never let them grow. In other words, there comes a time, how do they say it, where you've got to let the baby bird fly. Just like sometimes you have to let go and let your children grow. You have to let go and give them an opportunity. But be there. See, when you as children leave the home, and it's hard for them, but your parents let you go, do your parents say, okay, now I'm not having anything to do with you ever again? No. Most likely they're waiting by the phone the first couple of days to see if you're going to call and have anything to say, right? But you got to give them that experience. And oh, by the way, if they fail, do you just sit back, shake your head, and not say anything alone? They failed that time. No. A mentor's going to see that as an opportunity to do better next time, to help teach and to train. You get definitely success when you get the right opportunity. Acts 17, 13, and 14, it said, but when the Jews from Thessalonica learned that the word of God was preached by Paul at Berea, they came and stirred up the crowds. Then immediately the brethren sent Paul away to go to the sea, but both Silas and Timothy remained there. What did Paul do? He left him with something, but he was no longer with him, was he? He gave him an opportunity to stand without Paul right next to him. Now, does that mean that Paul wasn't going to respond if he needed anything? I don't believe so. But he had to have that opportunity to grow. And so we can't be afraid, and we have to allow for growth, and we have to allow for failure. Because where would we be as you look at yourself as a mentor today? Where would you be if you weren't given opportunities to grow? if you weren't given opportunities to learn on your own. If you hadn't had those, then you couldn't be a mentor, right? 1 Timothy 1:3-4 says, "As I urged you when I went into Macedonia, remain in Ephesus, that you may charge some that they teach no other doctrine, nor give heed to fables and endless genealogies which cause disputes, rather than godly edification which is in faith." Why do you leave him there? So that he could teach, right? I'm not there with you, but I've brought you along to a place where now you can do what? You can stand on your own 2 feet, right? And continue to do the things that you've been taught to do. Which means what? We need to believe in them, don't we? We need to believe in those that we are trying to mentor. And a mentor engages in a mentee to persevere in their work. Like I said, can you imagine seeing all the things that Timothy must have seen happen to Paul? And hearing all the things that, Paul recounts, how many times he's beaten and he's shipwrecked and all of these things that have happened. But he persevered, and you know what? We have to let the young people coming up know they're going to face difficulties in this world. I'm telling you what my children today are dealing with in school is nothing like anything you and I would have dealt with when we were in school, right? It was absurd. When we were in school, not only did we know a boy was a boy and a girl was a girl, but when they taught us at a young age, you had a boys' line and a girls' line. And oh, by the way, you couldn't say, "I'm feeling like a girl today." Or, "Oh, I'm wearing different clothes and I got a wig, so I'm a girl today." Nowadays, even at the kindergarten, first grade level, you can choose whether or not you want to be a boy or a girl. Folks, that's going to be tough to deal with. That's going to be tough to deal with. And there's always going to be something that comes up. So we need perseverance. What is that? It's steady persistence in a course of action. It is a purpose, a state, especially in despite of difficulties, obstacles, and discouragement. We have to let them know there's going to be tough times. Because if you teach it like it is in the world today, the religious world today says, all you got to do is send so much money to this particular evangelist or whoever he is, televangelist, and everything in your life is going to be perfect. God is going to bless you because you blessed me, right? My question would be, why do you need my money? Hasn't God blessed you? Right? If you blessed me. But this idea but what happens? What happens if you're taught that you will never sin? You will never have a difficulty in your life once you've come up out of the waters of baptism. What happens the very first time that happens? Everything I was told is a lie, right? You told me that everything would be perfect. You know what? Christ never told his disciples and his apostles that everything would be perfect. When Paul wrote, he didn't talk about if you have trials and tribulations. He said when you have them, right? So we have to encourage them to persevere, which means if we're leading by example right now, whatever it is that we're dealing with in the world today, some of the things like fighting gender issues and things like that, we have to persevere against those in order for them to see that perseverance works, right? The Lord's church today cannot give in on issues that are the hot button today, because what happens? Then the next generation that's watching you and learning from you says it's okay to give in. Right? And then where does that leave us? 2 Timothy 1:6-8. Therefore I remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of hands. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. Therefore do not be ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor of me, his prisoner, but share with me in the sufferings for the gospel according to the power of God. Paul's in prison, right? But he says, don't be discouraged or ashamed of the testimony that's put him in prison, but continue to share in what? Share in the good times? That's what I said. He said, but continue to share in the suffering, knowing that you must persevere. Verses 3 through 7 in 2 Timothy chapter 2. You therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. You must do this. Not again, if you do this. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. And if anyone competes in athletics, he is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. The hardworking farmer must first partake of the crops. He says, consider what I say, and may the Lord give you understanding in all things. A soldier doesn't get distracted from his duty. Matter of fact, they will ingrain into somebody their responsibility. An athlete exercises care and self-discipline in whatever it is that they are competing in. If you want, you know what, probably the most tried and least accomplished thing that you can do physically is weight loss. Unless you persevere, right? There are going to be times when you step on that scale and you think you had a good week and it says you gained 2 pounds. So, well, I guess I'm giving up, right? Or I would lose weight, but everybody that I spend time with eats, so there's really nothing I can do, right? Is it possible to lose weight? Can it happen? Absolutely. Does it require perseverance? Absolutely. How bad do you want it? Is it possible to acquire a home in heaven? Yep. Is it going to require perseverance? Yep. Again, how bad do you want it? Right? And that's what we have to not only teach, but before we can teach that, we have to what? We have to understand that ourselves, right? We have to know that that's the case. And a mentor truly loves the one that they mentee. So he calls Timothy a true son in the faith. He says, my son Timothy, my son, be diligent to come to me quickly. Rob, how come you didn't say anything about being a father? You know what? Paul served as a father. He wasn't biologically the father of Timothy, but he served as a father. And I want to show you something. I want to show you something that we can look through and do this. But before we do this, it says, for this reason I have sent Timothy to you, who is my beloved and faithful son in the Lord. So look at that. He's even telling other people, right? He's telling other people of his love for the Lord. Timothy doesn't know he's saying that. And worked with him as his father. He served me in the gospel. So there is that relationship. So consider this. What if I changed the words in this lesson and turned this into a Father's Day sermon? Instead of saying a mentor seeks a mentee, a father seeks out his children. Now that's a little bit of a tough run. My wife asked me, how does he do that? I said, part of that is, do you leave your child in their back bedroom alone 24 hours a day? Or do you go to get them and find them, and whether they like it or not, make them spend time with you? Right? Do you seek that? A father recognizes potential in their child, and they help build on that, and they help grow that, and they help develop that. With what? With the intent of them having a good physical life. A father prays for his children. Again, all we've done is we've taken mentor-mentee and changed the relationship to father and child. A father spends time with their children, and that is quality time. If the only time, say, yeah, I have dinner with my kids every day. We spend an hour watching TV together every day. That's time. Absolutely. Is that quality time? I don't know about you, and I hate to, when I'm watching sports and my children are spending time with me and they want to talk and I want to focus on sports, it's tough. It's tough. I forget they're trying to find a way to connect with Dad, because Dad's like, be quiet and let me watch, I want to hear what's going on. Or for people who really like, and I'll use the example, my oldest up here is smiling and making faces because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. This is for any parent, not just a father. So Christian will tell you she really likes to watch design shows and all this I can't even remember now, H something. I forget. You can see how much time she and I spend together watching it. But you have these people that renovate homes or they do these things, and one of the kids, Jared, loves to spend time with her and wants to connect with her on that. And so he wants to give her every idea and all the things that he would do to renovate. And I know she's sitting there thinking, but I want to know what the professional's doing, right? I want to know. But can you turn something into quality time, right? Isn't time really what you make it? You can turn it into quality time. When it comes to relationships with people, and this is true in any relationship, and it doesn't relate necessarily to what we're talking about, but as a sub point, if you go out on a date with someone for the first time and all you do is sit at a movie, how much did you get to know that person? You sit silently through a movie, and then you go home. You didn't learn anything about each other than maybe what you look like, but no quality time. Like I said, if you go, now can you turn? Yeah, if there is something that your child really loves, you as a parent or as a mentor, have you ever sat through a movie that meant absolutely nothing to you, but you stayed engaged in the movie and engaged with your child because it was important to them? That's quality time. I will be the first to admit, the interest path that my children have taken is very foreign to me. I grew up in a very sports-oriented, very physical, very active type environment. My children know video games. They know computers as well as any adult. It kills me to buy my son a game for his machine because I know he loves it, and 2 days later, this is my middle child, 2 days later he's won the game. He's already done it. And when they start talking about anime and Pokemon and all these other things that, some people absolutely love, I have no idea how to relate to that. Does that mean I don't let them ever talk about it or ever show interest in it? Not if I want to give them quality time, right? If I expect them to want to sit and watch a sporting event that they could care less about, if I want them to do that with me, then shouldn't I try to take an interest, right? Don't I need to? And as a father, as a mentor, you need to take an interest in what your mentee thinks is important. Father lives and leads by example, just like Paul and Timothy, when it comes to a father and a child. And you know what? Started at that age, right? Because when they're young, that's when they really look up to you. Maybe they don't know any better, but they look up to you like you can do anything. As you start to age and they start to age, they go through a period of time where they lose the magic that you provide. And all of a sudden, you're not quite the hero you used to be in their eyes, right? But if you have taught them along the way a love and appreciation, that will maintain. You'll go through it. I guarantee you'll go through it. You'll go through that struggle where, when I was young, I thought my parents knew everything. When I hit about junior high, I thought they knew nothing. When I moved on to now again, as I look back, I said, yeah, they were a lot smarter than I gave them credit for. But it's how you view that. But spend that time together, whatever it is, and it can be the simplest of things, and I think it is the simplest of things. There's a phrase that every young child gives, and every child that needs a mentor, that needs a big brother or something like that, there's a phrase that they will say too, and you know what that phrase is? Look at me. Look at me. I want somebody to care. I want somebody to work with me. I want somebody to guide me. I want somebody to love me and love the things that I love. It gets deep. And all of those things happen by doing what we're talking about. A father gives his son opportunities for growth. The first time you hand over the lawnmower, kid's really excited. In my mind, I was thinking, be careful what you wish for. But it's like, I really want to get to mow the lawn. It's really important. So the day finally comes that you let them mow the lawn, and they get to do it. Maybe for a year, it's exciting. Then it's like almost having to force them later on. It's not so exciting, but you had to let go and you had to let them do that. Teaching your child to drive? In my family, that was the wife's job. It would not have gone well. Personality-wise and understanding, I would have scared Jared to death because I'm more blunt and direct. And I could even see it when he first started asking. He still was nervous the first few times that I rode with him. And so you have to figure out. But at some point, we had to learn to let him drive, right? Because at some point, I want him to go pick up something at the store, and I don't feel like leaving, right? I mean, when you mentor and you train and you teach others to do things, when you teach other people how to preach the word, then they'll go out and do it too, so you don't have to do all the work yourself, right? And a father truly loves his children. So, what have we learned as we start to close out this lesson? The church needs good mentors, teaching and mentoring. And the church needs good fathers, teaching, mentoring, and fathering. As you stop and think about your life today, as you stop and think about what kind of example, if you're older, what kind of example you are setting for the young, and you feel like your example has not been what it ought to be, you don't have to come forward and just confess sin. You don't have to come forward just because you're ready to be baptized. Those are great reasons to come forward, and we encourage it. But you can come forward and say, you know what, I haven't sinned, but I've struggled with something, and I don't want to sin, right? Why not cut it off before it happens, right? If I'm struggling with something, cut it off and learn from it. You can pray for that. If you're a young person, are you seeking out the wisdom? Are you willing to allow somebody to mentor you? Or are you too sown in your ideas thinking that I know it all? Because I'll tell you right now, you don't. And neither does your mentor. But your mentor knows more than his experience. You may know something, they may have experienced it. So are you looking at the proper examples? And we know, ask yourself, and I don't do any of this, but who do I follow on Facebook? Right? Who am I trying to model and be like? Right? Is it professional athletes? Is it movie stars? And are any of them really who you should be patterning yourself after? Paul said it best. I believe it's 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, where he makes a very simple statement. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. Right? So ultimately, what the mentee is seeing in Paul is Christ. And as a young person, are you looking? And if you're in a position right now where you are not a child of God, you don't have the benefit of him as a father. And I know growing up with my dad could do this to your dad. My dad could beat your dad at this, that. I have a spiritual father that can trump every one of your dads. And if you're not a child of God, you don't. And I have a father who's going to give me more than any other father could possibly give their child. And right now you don't. But guess what? Right now you can. Don't you want the inheritance? When you really stop and think about it and you hear the things that God has to offer for you, and we talked about in class, you have to accept the gift. Don't you want it? Without even looking at the other possibility. And quite frankly, the other possibility should be a terror and should be a reason why. But without even looking at the alternative I don't need to look at the alternative to see how great the offer is. If there's something that we can do to get your life right with God and to make sure that He is who you are following and make sure that you are following and mentoring others or allowing yourself to be mentored, let us know what we as a congregation can do for you as we stand and as we sing.